Hi, I'm Austin from Boss, here at American Musical Supply, and today we are talking about the SY-300 guitar synthesizer. So really cool synth. You'll notice that I'm using a 1/4 inch connector on my guitar. So with 1/4 inch technology, I can now play full polyphonic synthesis using the SY-300. So a little bit about how this thing works and what it's doing. And we're going to get into our Tone Studio Editor app, which again is free on boss.info when you log in. And basically what I was doing for that sound, I basically had a sequence going on in a C major 7 chord, arpeggiating up and down. And I was using the filter cutoff on a LPF to roll in the highs and the lows. Pretty simple, and the signal flow is actually very similar. So here we have our 3 oscillators. All the chains can be together. I also have 4 multi-effects sections here. So I can add in things like delay and overdrive and compression and reverb to any parts of my signal chain, which is pretty cool. I could also reroute the oscillators in any specific chain format or direction that I want. So I can reroute these to about 8 different combinations of signal flow. I also have a mixer built in, so I can blend all of my oscillator sounds as well, which is pretty cool. A return and through is really nice because then I can start messing around with dry guitar signal, which is what I was using before. As I had the sequencer holding and playing that arpeggio over and over, I had dry guitar just going straight through using the dry and through on this patch. So let's hear a couple of the other sounds that are on the SY-300. This one I like to call Space Invaders. And this one's really cool. This is just basically a couple of square and saw waves working together in order to give you a sound. So here's that. So that was a little bit of the Space Invaders noise. Again, the tracking is absolutely seamless. So as you noticed, I was tapping away and using the Control 1 pedal to bring up the shift pitch on the square wave up 2 octaves, which is pretty cool. So, and you can even actually see it in the Tone Studio Editor. As I press and hold the Control 1, the pitch will shift up and down, which is pretty cool. So a little bit about how the Tone Studio Editor will work with the SY-300. So here I have a couple of basic menus. I can select an oscillator just by hovering over it and clicking on it. I can scroll into this little sub-menu here. I can change my waveforms and change their sounds and their shapes. I can also refine their pitch. I have a fine pitch mode here, as well as a couple of other controls over here as far as pitch envelope attack and stuff like that. Next little block section here, I have my filters. So now what a filter will do is a filter will roll off a certain section of frequencies. So whether I have a low pass filter, which means only the lows will pass, or a high pass filter, only the highs will pass, I can control all of those functions here. The filter slope, the resonation of that filter, and also the attack when I want to put it onto a low frequency oscillator, which is our next section. And low frequency oscillators are basically going to cause movement in our signal. So we can attach these to things like filters, pitch, and amplitude in order to control volume, filters, and pitch modulation using low-frequency oscillators. So it's really cool that I have that ability. I actually have a few of those low-frequency oscillator movements built into my SY-300. So on this one, as I play into the note or as I hold a note, you'll notice that as I turn on Control 1, you'll hear a low frequency oscillator starting to move. So all that extra little bit of movement in that signal was all being caused by low frequency oscillators and attaching those to my filters and my amplitude. I also have the step sequencer. The step sequencer I was using for the original song I played in the beginning. And this is editable and has 3 of them, so I have a step sequencer for each one. And these are actually editable within a 2-octave range. So I can set these step sequencers however I want and tie them to my oscillators, whether I can have them all synced up or I can have them be separate, which is pretty cool. Lastly, over here I have something called layer. So what layer will do is layer will actually separate my oscillator sounds via a certain pitch range. So now I can actually have the first oscillator, let's say, be on, I don't know, more of the higher frequencies. And maybe oscillator 3 will be more on lower frequencies. So I basically take this upper knob and I drag it back, or I take the lower knob and I crank it up in order to separate the sections. So now if I play higher notes, or if I play lower notes, I'll get 2 totally different sounds. This works really, really good on extended range instruments such as 8-string and 7-string guitars or extended range basses, which this unit is actually also good for bass. We can actually go into our input section here. So in the input sensitivity, I have a bass mode on and off. I can simply turn that on when I plug in a bass, so that way I can add all those extra low notes, and the tracking will be seamless on a bass as well. This also has an input compressor as well, so I can actually dial in a certain compression rate for different guitars. Using the input compressor will actually shine the oscillators a little bit more. So it can actually refine the sound and actually make it sound even better, which is actually really cool. As long, or also with other compressors and limiters and things of such. So not only is the SY-300 a really, really good guitar synthesizer, but I can also use the SY-300 as a really cool multi-effects. So because I have these 4 multi-effects sections in here, and I can use one of the oscillators to run guitar as my oscillator sound or the input sound, I can start using the effects just as normal stop boxes. So in this patch, I have the my oscillator 1 here is the dry guitar input, so I get just dry guitar, and I put a univibe on top of it. So now I have a patch with just univibe. And I also set the Control 1 pedal on the actual SY-300 to speed up and down the univibe sound. And the Control 1 can actually be set to anything that I want in the SY-300. So a little bit on how we do that. In the computer, it's a lot easier to do it, so I'll show you in the tone editor. So now we have our assignments for our controls, right? So if I go into CTL1, it's already assigned here. I have assignment 1. I assigned it to a patch because I want to change what the control does in each patch. The assignment is on. I'm going to set it to manual because I want to tell it what to do. And I set it to the effects 1 univibe sound, and it gives me a couple of options of what the target can be: rate, depth, or effect level, because those are the only 3 controls in the univibe section. But if I go to other controls here, I have all the controls for all of my effects sections, plus I have all the controls for all of my oscillators. So in the Space Invaders patch that I was playing for you before, I was able to set the pitch of the oscillator to go up 2 octaves. So I basically just set it to that within this section. In this section, it does a speed up and down of the univibe. In this patch, this one's called Slicer Verb, and in this one I actually set the Control 1 to be a master BPM or a tap. So no matter what rate I put in for different effects or different low frequency oscillators, I can control the rates of them using this tap pedal. So here we go. So pretty cool that I'm actually able to get some of those kind of sounds out of it too. So it's not just only a great guitar synthesizer, it's also a great multi-effects and a backup tool for when, you know, you're running out of space on your pedal board and you're trying to get some auxiliary effects into your signal, which is pretty cool. The SY-300 has 100 patches for savable user sets, such as ones that I'm making here. And I also have 70 factory preset patches that I can always access a little bit later, tweak and edit and stuff. I also have this very large but built-in tuner, which is really, really cool. So it kind of saves space on my board by doing that. To scroll up and down, I use these buttons over here, or I can go into my Tone Studio Editor app and just click on the actual preset itself. On the SY-300, I have a couple of output routing options. So the first one's right after the input is going to be my return and through. I can either use this as an effects loop to loop in other compact pedals that are already in my collection, or I can use the through output as a dry running plain dry guitar signal all the time. My next set is my main output, which is really cool. I can basically use this to go directly into the amplifier and keep it simple, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm just running the SY-300 directly into the front of this Katana 100 head over here. And then next I have the sub-outputs. The sub-outputs are cool because I can move these in the signal chain and change what I'm hearing from the sub-outputs. So I can use those to send to a secondary source, maybe a bass amp, maybe a PA, whatever have you, totally works. I also have Midi as well. This can send monophonic pitch to Midi conversion, and it can also send and receive PC and CC messages. So if you're trying to integrate the SY-300 into a larger system, such as our ES8 switching system or any other Midi-based pedals, you will be able to control the SY-300 from those units. I also have an expression pedal or dual button foot switch input, so I can add even more controls than what I already have on the SY-300, which is pretty cool. I have USB. This actually works both ways, just like most of our USB products. So I can either record from the SY-300 to my computer or DAW device, or I can use the computer to edit the tones as I'm demonstrating here for you. And that is the SY-300 guitar synthesizer from Boss. I'm Austin from Boss here at American Musical Supply. Thank you so much for watching.